A low chant echoes inside a stone chamber, a sound lost for 3,000 years. This is the world of the ancient ritualist, the shadowy figures who once guided humanity's deepest conversations with the unseen. Priests, shamans, and cult leaders orchestrated ceremonies of breathtaking complexity, ceremonies now almost entirely forgotten. Today, we recover 25 of these lost rites. Our journey spans from the dawn of civilization to the edge of the classical world, from the deserts of Mesopotamia to the mountains of Peru. By the end, you will possess a secret history of humanity, written not in wars or kings, but in ritual fire and sacred blood. We will see how a king could be humiliated to save his kingdom, and why a community might willingly send a living man into a blazing effigy. These ceremonies expose the raw core of ancient life, the primal hopes and fears that moved entire cultures. What forgotten part of ourselves might we recognize in their echoes? Our first forgotten ceremony begins in the dim, smoky homes of ancient Mesopotamia. Here the dead were not gone, they were hungry. The ritual was called the Kispum, a monthly act of remembrance that was, in truth, an act of survival. Every family, from the humblest farmer to the king in his palace, performed it without fail. The purpose was stark and deeply practical, to feed your ancestors so they would not feed on you. An unattended spirit, known as an etimu, was believed to grow weak and bitter in the bleak underworld. A bitter spirit would claw its way back into the world of the living, not as a benevolent guide, but as a haunting, destructive force. They brought sickness, nightmares, and ruin to the household. The Kispum was a monthly offering, a sacred meal ticket to keep the peace between two worlds. The ceremony itself was intimate and precise. The family would gather, often at dusk. They would call out the names of their ancestors, reciting a lineage that stretched back generations, ensuring no one was forgotten. Then came the offerings. They did not place food on an altar. Instead, they poured libations directly into the earth, the gateway to the netherworld. Through a special pipe or a conduit in the floor, they would offer fresh water, coarse barley bread, and most importantly, beer. This was not a symbolic gesture. They believed the essence of the food and drink traveled down, nourishing the etimu in its dark abode. Imagine the scene, a family huddled in their home, the smell of bread and fermented grain in the air, as they carefully pour sustenance into a hole in the ground, whispering names into the gathering dark. It was a transaction of care and fear, a continuous cycle of obligation that bound the living to the dead in a silent, eternal pact. The ritualist here was the head of the household, performing a duty that maintained the very fabric of reality. To forget a single name was to risk inviting chaos back through the pipe. While the Mesopotamians fed their dead, the Egyptians sought to awaken them. Our second forgotten ceremony is the opening of the mouth, a cornerstone of Egyptian belief performed by a specialized ritualist known as a sem priest. Its goal was not mere remembrance, but a literal, magical reactivation. They believed death paralyzed the body's senses, trapping the soul within a silent, blind, and starving shell. Without intervention, the deceased would remain forever mute and helpless in the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. This ritual was the key that unlocked eternity. This ceremony was a complex symphony of words and actions, but its most critical moment involved two sacred tools. The first was the Pesesh Kef, a ceremonial blade shaped like a fishtail, often made of meteoritic iron, the metal of the gods. The second was an adze, a carpenter's tool shaped like a hoe, but here crafted from dark, polished stone. The sem priest, wearing the leopard skin of his office, would approach the upright mummy. With solemn precision, he would touch the Pesesh Kef to the mummy's lips, then the adze. This was not a physical cutting, but a symbolic opening. He would then touch the eyes and the ears, each gesture accompanied by specific incantations spoken in a voice of power. Imagine the tension in that sacred space, the smell of incense thick in the air, as the priest performed this delicate operation on the linen-wrapped form. With each touch, he was believed to restore a function: the mouth to eat and speak the magic words needed in the afterlife, the eyes to see the sun god Ra, the ears to hear the prayers of the living. This act transformed the inert corpse into a viable vessel for the Ka, the individual's life force. A mummy was just a preserved body, but a mummy that had undergone the opening of the mouth became an eternal home, a living statue ready to receive offerings forever. The ritual's immense power was rooted in myth. It was said that the god Anubis himself first performed it on the body of Osiris, the first mummy and king of the dead, thereby granting him resurrection. Every time a Sem priest raised the adze, he was reenacting that primordial, divine moment, channeling the power that defeated death itself. For the Egyptians, eternal life was not a given. It was a ritual achievement purchased with meticulous ceremony. The transition from feeding the dead to awakening them reveals a core truth. Ancient rituals were often about controlling forces far greater than ourselves. But some ceremonies sought not to control a force but to become one. In the sun-drenched courtyards of Bronze Age Crete, a different kind of ritualist took center stage: the acrobat. Our third forgotten ceremony is the Minoan bull leaping, or torcathapsia, a spectacle of breathtaking danger and enigmatic purpose. The images are iconic. In the frescoes of the Palace of Knossos, young men and women, lean and athletic, are frozen in mid-air over the back of a charging bull. One grasps the horns, using the animal's own violent toss to propel themselves into a somersault, while a teammate stands ready to catch them on the other side. This was not a chaotic rodeo. The frescoes show a highly stylized, almost balletic sequence, suggesting a formalized ritual performed before an audience. But what was it for? The bull was no ordinary animal in Minoan culture. It was a symbol of raw, untamed power, often linked to the earth-shaking god Poseidon. To engage with the bull was to engage with the divine itself. One prevailing theory is that this was a rite of passage. The youth of the elite perhaps proved their courage, agility, and favor from the gods by literally vaulting over the embodiment of masculine power. Success meant entering adulthood with divine approval etched into their very bones. Another darker interpretation views the entire event as a prelude to sacrifice. The bull, after being conquered by human skill and daring, may have then been ritually slaughtered, its life force offered up, with the leapers acting as the sacred intermediaries who first mastered its spirit. Or perhaps it was primarily a display of royal authority. The palace at Knossos was the stage. By orchestrating this dance with death, the ruler demonstrated an ability to harness chaotic natural power, to impose elegant order upon it, and to protect the community through this sacred spectacle. The true purpose is lost to us. We do not know the chants that rang out, the specific prayers offered by the presiding ritualists, or the exact fate of those who stumbled. The silence surrounding the ceremony is as profound as the roar of the bull must have been. All we have are those vibrant images of human bodies flying through the air, suspended for a moment between the horns of the beast and the hands of their comrades, performing a mystery we can see but never fully understand. The bull leaper's daring flight was a dance with raw power, but for an empire, survival demanded a more systematic approach to the divine. In the rugged highlands of ancient Anatolia, the Hittite Empire perfected this approach over 38 exhausting sacred days. This was the N.Th.Sum festival, a sprawling spring ritual of such immense political and spiritual importance that its failure was unthinkable. Discovered on meticulous cuneiform tablets, the festival's schedule reads like a sacred military campaign, its objective clear: to guarantee the fertility of the land, the health of the king, and the unshakable stability of the state for another year. The entire ceremony was a grand reactivation of the world. At its heart were the gods themselves, or rather, their physical representatives. Statues of deities were carefully removed from their temples and placed on processional wagons. For days, these divine caravans would travel from city to city, from temple to temple, in a symbolic tour of the kingdom. Imagine the sight: polished statues of weather gods and sun goddesses jostling along mountain roads, accompanied by chanting priests, musicians, and the smoke of countless offerings. This mobile divine assembly was not a parade for spectators. It was a critical realignment of cosmic power, bringing blessing directly to every corner of the realm. The king and queen were not mere observers in this drama. They were the chief ritualists, the human pivot upon which the entire ceremony turned. Their actions were charged with symbolic meaning. In one key rite, they would take sacred cords and tie intricate knots. This act was believed to bind divine power, to secure it firmly to the Hittite people and their land. Later, they would solemnly untie those same knots, a controlled release of that power to flow into the fields, the flocks, and the royal lineage itself. Every animal sacrificed, every hymn sung in the ancient Hittite language, every recitation of creation myths was a thread in this tapestry of renewal. The festival was a massive, state-funded insurance policy against drought, famine, and rebellion. For over a month, the normal business of empire paused, and the entire machinery of government turned to the single task of pleasing the gods. The detailed tablets that outline its every hour are a testament to a profound belief that the fate of an empire could be ritually negotiated, one procession and one knotted cord at a time. A king's power could be measured by the ground a single horse could walk. This is the fifth forgotten ceremony, the Ashvamedha, the horse sacrifice of ancient Vedic India. It was not a simple act of slaughter, but a year-long geopolitical drama, a ritual of such staggering scale and ambition that it redefined the very concept of kingship. The ceremony began with the selection of a perfect stallion, a horse without a single dark hair, its coat the color of pure milk or sunlight. This animal was consecrated through fire and mantra, transforming it from a mere beast into a living, breathing embodiment of royal authority and cosmic energy. Then it was set free. For one full year, the sacred horse was allowed to roam wherever it wished, followed closely by the king's army. Wherever the horse wandered, that land was considered claimed for the king. If any rival chieftain dared to stop the horse or challenge the accompanying army, war was declared immediately. The horse's unchallenged wanderings were a silent, mobile declaration of sovereignty, a map of dominion drawn in hoofprints. Imagine that procession moving across the landscape, the pristine white stallion at its head, a symbol of untamed royal will, trailed by hundreds of armed men whose sole duty was to protect its journey and enforce its unspoken claim. The entire year was a tense, living ritual of expansion and dominance. After the year of wandering concluded, the horse was led back to the royal capital for the grand, climactic sacrifice. The scale was immense, involving hundreds of priests who chanted continuous hymns from the Rigveda for days on end. The ritual space became a microcosm of the universe itself. The sacrifice was intricate and symbolic. The horse was ritually suffocated, a method meant to preserve its vital essence within the body. Then came the dismemberment. Its parts were carefully distributed and offered into the sacred fire, each piece assigned to a specific deity or a natural force, a gesture meant to nourish and renew the entire cosmos through this one perfect offering. But the most startling, and to modern sensibilities the most challenging, part of the ritual followed. In a deeply symbolic act, the chief queen would lay down beside the deceased horse under a ceremonial blanket. Priests would chant specific verses that enacted a symbolic mating. This was not a literal act, but a profound ritual metaphor. The horse represented the vigor of the sun, the fertility of the rain, and the unstoppable power of conquest. The queen, representing the earth and the kingdom itself, was the vessel to receive that vitality. Through this symbolic union, the horse's life force was transferred not to her, but through her to the king, and by extension to the entire nation. It was believed to ensure the fertility of the land, the prosperity of the people, and the continued strength of the royal lineage. the Ashvamedha was the ultimate statement. It declared that the king was not just a political ruler, but a divine agent of cosmic renewal, his authority woven into the fabric of the world through the ultimate sacrifice. The wandering horse claimed the earth, and its ritualized death was meant to make that claim eternal. The Ashvamedha's grandeur was an external spectacle of power, but the most vital offering could be found within the ruler's own body. Deep in the steamy rainforests of ancient Mexico, the Olmec, Mesoamerica's mother culture, practiced a ceremony of profound intimacy and pain, the bloodletting auto-sacrifice. For the Olmec, the cosmos was a fragile, living entity that required constant nourishment. The gods had shed their own blood to create humanity and the world. This sacred debt demanded repayment. The most potent substance for this payment was not grain or animal life, but the life force of the ruler himself. This was not a punishment, but the highest privilege and duty. The ritualist, often a shaman king, would prepare in a state of ritual purity. The tools were as symbolic as they were terrifying. A stingray spine, plucked from a creature that moves between worlds in the sea, was a common instrument. So too were razor-sharp obsidian blades, glass forged in the volcanic fires of the earth, and sometimes even the claw of a jaguar, the ultimate symbol of shamanic power. The king would then perform the act. He might draw a spine through his tongue, letting the blood drip onto strips of bark paper. He might pierce his earlobes or, in the most extreme rites, even his genitals. The pain was not an unfortunate side effect, it was the gateway. They believed the intense, focused agony combined with blood loss induced an altered state of consciousness. The royal blood now offered became a bridge. As it soaked into the paper or dripped into a ceremonial bowl, it was not merely lost. It transformed into a vapor, a sacred nourishment that ascended to feed the weary gods and revitalize the very fabric of reality. The sun would rise, the rains would come, and the cosmic order would hold for another day because a king had chosen to bleed. But the ceremony had a second, equally vital purpose: communication. The trance state brought on by bloodletting opened a channel to the spirit world. In Olmec art, we see the results of these visions. Carved figures often show rulers with their eyes half closed in ecstatic communion. From their wounds, great swirling volutes like sacred smoke or vines erupt into the air. Within these swirls, we glimpse the faces of spirits, ancestors, and most powerfully, the word jaguar, a terrifying hybrid of human and jungle predator. This was the ultimate goal: to shed one's human form and merge with the divine jaguar spirit, gaining its strength and wisdom to guide the people. This intimate act of self-sacrifice performed in the quiet of a temple set a template that would echo for millennia. The Olmec belief that royal blood was the ultimate currency of the cosmos became the bedrock for every great Mesoamerican civilization that followed. The Maya, the Aztec, all would build their own rituals upon this foundational, painful truth, that a leader's greatest power was the willingness to open his own veins for the life of the world. The stingray spine and the jaguar's claw were tools for a personal conversation with the gods. But in the Bronze Age courts of China's Shang dynasty, the dialogue with the divine was a matter of state, recorded not in visions but in the cracking of bone. The seventh forgotten ceremony is the oracle bone divination, a ritual that transformed animal remains into the direct physical archive of a kingdom's destiny. The ritualists, likely a specialized class of diviners, served as royal technologists of the unseen. Their medium was not blood but heat. They began with the cleaned shell of a turtle, specifically the flat plastron from its belly or the shoulder blade of an ox. These were not random choices. The turtle, moving between land and water, was a creature of cosmic significance, its shell a model of the round heaven above and flat earth below. The ox scapula was a symbol of strength and agricultural life. The diviner would meticulously polish the bone, then use a bronze drill to carve a series of neat, hollow pits along its back. This preparation was itself a sacred act, a careful crafting of the conduit. Then came the moment of truth. A red-hot bronze rod, or sometimes a burning ember, was applied to the base of one of these hollows. The intense, focused heat created immense stress within the bone, and then with a sharp pop audible in the silent chamber, it would crack. That sound was the voice of the ancestors. The pattern of the fracture, its length, its angle, its relation to other cracks was a coded message. The diviner, trained in this cryptic language, would interpret its meaning. Was the crack auspicious or inauspicious? Did it signal approval or warning? The questions posed were the very stuff of statecraft. Will the harvest be abundant? Should the king launch an attack to the north next 10-day week? Will the queen bear a son? Is the coming sickness a punishment from a displeased ancestor? Every major decision, from warfare to agriculture to royal childbirth, was first referred to this crackling hotline, but the Shang did not leave this divine correspondence to memory. After the reading, the ritual reached its final, revolutionary stage. Using a sharp graver, a scribe would carve the entire transaction directly onto the bone or shell. First, the date from the complex 60-day cycle, then the diviner's name, then the question posed word for word, and finally the prognostication. The crack was read as auspicious, or the crack foretells misfortune. Sometimes, weeks or months later, they would even carve the actual outcome. It indeed rained, or we did not capture any prisoners. This practice created the earliest significant body of Chinese writing we possess. Those etched characters, angular and ancient, are more than historical records. They are fossilized moments of supreme tension, where a king and his ritualist held their breath, listening for the future in the sound of splitting bone. The ceremony was the ultimate fusion of spiritual authority and administrative record-keeping. It provided divine sanction for human action, turning uncertainty into a script that could be filed, referenced, and obeyed. In the quiet pop of a turtle's shell, a dynasty heard the voice of its destiny and then carefully wrote down what it said. The oracle bone's crack was a question for the living, but gold could provide an answer for the dead. In the fortified citadels of Mycenaean Greece, around 1600 years before the Common Era, a ruler's journey into the afterlife began with a sheet of precious metal and the steady tap of a craftsman's hammer. This is the eighth forgotten ceremony, the ritual creation and placement of the gold funeral mask. The most famous of these, discovered by Heinrich Schliemann and famously dubbed the Mask of Agamemnon, is a masterpiece of solemn preservation. It was not a generic symbol of royalty, but a startlingly individual portrait. Artisans would take a thin sheet of pure gold and, through meticulous repoussé work, hammer it from the reverse over a wooden form, carefully shaping the distinctive features of the deceased ruler's face. The broad forehead, the thin lips, the arched eyebrows, even the detailed ears and stylized mustache, each was rendered to create a durable, luminous double. This was not merely a burial good. It was a ritual object of the highest order, its creation a sacred act meant to solve a profound spiritual problem. The Mycenaeans, like many ancient peoples, feared the dissolution of identity after death. The gold mask was a solution, a permanent, incorruptible shell meant to hold and fix the ruler's likeness for all eternity, ensuring he would be recognized by both the gods of the underworld and his own ancestors. But the mask was only the final, gleaming act of a much larger funerary drama. The ceremony likely spanned days. We can reconstruct its echoes from the grave goods and the later epic poems that may preserve fragments of this world. First, there would have been the prothesis, the laying out of the body within the palace Megaron, where mourners would come to pay respects. Then the ekphora, the funeral procession to the royal cemetery. Imagine the scene moving from the citadel gates, chariots draped in finery, their wheels crunching on the stony path, warriors in bronze armor carrying the shrouded body on a bier, followed by a train of mourners wailing in a formalized lament. The destination was a beehive-shaped tholos tomb or a deep shaft grave, an artificial cavern meant to mirror the underworld itself. Before the body was laid to rest, sacrifices would have saturated the ground with power. Priests likely slaughtered bulls or sheep, their blood offered to chthonic deities like Hades and Persephone, a payment or plea for safe passage. A funeral feast for the living with copious amounts of wine and meat would have been held near the tomb, a final communal bond with the departed king. Then came the most intimate ritual moment, the preparation of the body itself. It is plausible that priests performed a kind of anointing, using sacred oils or unguents to cleanse and consecrate the physical form. There may have been a ceremony to formally close the senses, a touch to the lips, the eyes, the ears, much like the Egyptian rite, but with a different intent, not to awaken but to seal. The body, now prepared, would be arranged upon its back within the stone chamber, and then, with great solemnity, the hammered gold mask was lowered over the face. That final act was a ritual of closure and eternal preservation. The flickering torchlight would have caught its surface one last time before the tomb was sealed, capturing a king's face not in fading memory, but in the everlasting glow of the sun's metal. In that darkness, the mask did more than adorn. It asserted a defiant, golden I am against the formless void of death. A golden mask preserved a king's identity for eternity, but in the heart of Mesopotamia, a ruler's power required a yearly public dismantling. The ninth forgotten ceremony is the Akitu festival, a 12-day Babylonian and Assyrian New Year spectacle that was less a celebration and more a high-stakes reset of the entire cosmos. Its central, shocking act was not an affirmation of royal glory, but its deliberate, ritualized destruction. On the fourth day of the festival, the king would enter the great temple of Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon. There, before the towering, silent statue of the deity, the high priest would perform an unthinkable act. He would strip the king of every symbol of his office, the scepter, the crown, the royal ring, even the ceremonial mace. The ruler, now just a man in simple linen, would then kneel. The high priest would deliver a stinging slap across the king's face, a physical blow to royal dignity heard throughout the hushed temple. But this was not a coup, it was a necessary purification. The slap was meant to bring tears to the king's eyes, proof of his genuine humility and repentance before the god. In that moment of profound vulnerability, the king would make a startling declaration. He would swear that he had not neglected his duties, that he had not sinned against Marduk or ruled unjustly over the past year. The high priest, speaking for the god, would then offer a word of reassurance. Only then were the royal regalia returned. This ritual humiliation served a vital, terrifying purpose. It publicly demonstrated that the king's authority was not his own divine right, but a loan from the gods contingent upon his righteous rule. By being symbolically unmade and remade each year, the king and the kingdom were cleansed of the accumulated spiritual pollution of the past year, ensuring Marduk's continued favor. The festival then exploded into a city-wide drama of renewal. The climax was the grand procession of the gods. Statues of deities from across Mesopotamia were brought to Babylon on ornate barges and chariots, forming a divine parliament. The centerpiece was the journey of Marduk's statue from his temple to the Akitu house, a special building outside the city walls. This journey symbolized Marduk's mythical battle against the primordial sea monster Tiamat. The entire city would line the processional way, cheering as their god went forth to reenact his cosmic victory. At the Akitu house, the high priests would perform the most important recitation of the year, the Enuma Elish, the epic poem of creation that detailed Marduk's rise to kingship over the gods. Chanting this story was not entertainment, it was a magical act. By recounting how order was born from chaos at the dawn of time, they were actively refounding the world, reweaving the fabric of reality for the coming year. The ceremony concluded with the sacred marriage rite, the Hieros Gomos. Here, the king would take on the role of the god, and a high priestess would embody the goddess of love and war, Ishtar. Their symbolic union was a potent fertility ritual, meant to channel divine creative energy into the land, the animals, and the people, guaranteeing abundance and prosperity. The Akitu was the ultimate state ritual. For 12 days, politics, warfare, and commerce stopped. The entire society participated in a sacred drama where the king's pride was sacrificed, the gods went to war, and creation itself was recited back into existence. It was a collective sigh of relief, a way for an entire civilization to say, the old year, with all its mistakes and decay, is over. We have humbled our ruler, pleased our gods, and now we can begin again. The king's public humiliation was a grand bargain for cosmic order, but for the Zapotec priest, the transaction was far more personal and visceral. In the valleys of Oaxaca, Mexico, the great city of Monte Albon rose upon an artificially flattened mountain, a testament to a civilization that spoke directly to its gods through pain. The 10th forgotten ceremony belongs to the Zapotec and their worship of the Pitao, the pantheon of deities who controlled every facet of existence, from lightning and rain to maize and death. To influence these powerful beings, the ritualists turned to a tool as common as the landscape itself, the sharp spine of the Megi plant. This was not the royal bloodletting of the Olmec or the later Maya. This was a systematic priestly duty captured for eternity on the stern faces of ceramic funeral urns. These urns, often placed in tombs, show seated figures with impassive expressions, their hands resting on their knees, but look closer. Protruding from their tongues, their ears, or even their limbs are long, carved spines. This is not a depiction of torture, but of sacred office. The priest is shown in the eternal act of his most critical function, drawing his own blood as an offering to the Pitao. The context for this auto-sacrifice was precise and vital. Before the planting season, priests would bleed to petition the rain god Kasijo for life-giving storms. When a new temple pyramid was completed or a noble's tomb was sealed, bloodletting ceremonies sanctified the space, binding it to the divine realm. The act itself was a ritual of focused intensity. The priest, often fasting and purified, would take a Megi spine, its natural sharpness, a gift from the earth, and draw it through a soft part of his body. The tongue was a common sight, a sacrifice of speech and sustenance. The blood was not wasted. It was carefully collected on strips of bark paper or squares of cotton cloth. These stained offerings were then treated with immense reverence. They were not buried or displayed, they were burned. In the crackle of the flames, the Zapotec believed the very essence of the offering was transformed. The smoke carried the vital life force, the Ixiptla or spiritual essence of the blood, directly upward to the gods, a nourishing vapor that could sate their needs and secure their favor. Imagine the quiet solemnity of that moment, deep within a temple courtyard. The smell of copal incense mixing with the sharper scent of burning organic material. The priest watching the smoke curl into the sky, believing with absolute certainty that his personal suffering was now traveling skyward as a tangible currency. This practice firmly anchors the Zapotec within the wider Mesoamerican world of auto-sacrifice, a tradition spanning millennia, but the Zapotec made it distinctly their own. Their rituals were less about the ruler's personal visionary trance and more about the structured, professional duty of a priestly class. The ceramic urns are their testament. They are not monuments to kings, but to the anonymous intermediaries who, generation after generation, opened their own veins to keep the rain falling and the world in balance. In their silent, spiked figures, we see the brutal, beautiful logic of an ancient pact, that the breath of the gods could be bought with the blood of their servants. From the quiet, personal bloodletting of the Zapotec priest, we journey to a windswept field outside the walls of Carthage, a place that forces us to confront one of history's most disturbing and debated rituals. Our 11th forgotten ceremony is the Phoenician Malk sacrifice, a practice that lives in the shadowy borderland between sacred duty and profound horror. The evidence comes from sites called tophets, sacred precincts where archaeologists have unearthed thousands of small, lidded urns. Inside these urns are the cremated bones of very young children, sometimes newborns, buried beneath stone markers carved with a cryptic symbol, a simplified figure with upraised arms representing the goddess Tanit alongside a disc and crescent for the god Baal-Hamon. This grim archive has ignited a fierce, unresolved debate that cuts to the heart of how we understand an ancient civilization. Were these the remains of children offered to the gods in a desperate mock sacrifice? The classical enemies of Carthage, Greek and Roman historians like Diodorus Siculus described a chilling ceremony. In times of extreme crisis, a devastating plague, a crushing military defeat, the threat of famine, the Carthaginians would turn to their most powerful and most terrible recourse. A bronze statue of the god Baal-Hamon was prepared, its arms outstretched and sloping downward towards a pit of fire below. According to these accounts, after days of mournful incantations and processions, an infant or young child, often from a noble family to show the utmost sincerity, would be placed upon those metal arms. The statue's design would then cause the child to roll from the arms, tumbling into the flames as a sacrifice to appease the angry deity. The act was called a molk, a word related to a vow or pledge, suggesting this was the ultimate fulfillment of a sacred promise. The cremated remains would then be collected and interred in the Tophet, the stone marker serving as a permanent receipt for the payment made to the gods. Yet many modern scholars urge extreme caution. They point out that our only detailed descriptions come from hostile foreign sources with every reason to paint the Carthaginians as barbaric monsters. The archaeological evidence, they argue, can be read another way. Infant mortality in the ancient world was tragically common. Could the Tophet simply be a special cemetery for children who died naturally, their remains sanctified through cremation and dedicated to the protective deities Tanit and Baal-Hamon? The markers in this view are not records of sacrifice but heartfelt pleas from grieving parents, asking the gods to watch over their child in the afterlife. The truth likely lies somewhere in a complex, uncomfortable middle ground. It is possible that both practices occurred, that the Tophet held both the remains of children who succumbed to illness and those who were, in rare moments of existential terror, offered in a ritual that the Carthaginians themselves believed was a necessary, if awful, transaction for the survival of their entire community. To stand in that field is to feel the weight of that ambiguity. Each small urn represents a profound loss, whether from the cruel randomness of nature or the calculated cruelty of belief. The ceremony, whether myth or reality, speaks to a terrifying ancient logic that the most precious thing a society possesses might also be the only currency valuable enough to buy its future. The smoke from the Carthaginian Tophet speaks of a loss that is almost unbearable to contemplate. Yet on the vast, open steppe north of the Black Sea, death was not a quiet end, but a thunderous, year-long spectacle of loyalty and terror. The Scythians, nomadic horsemen who lived and died by the sword, believed a dead king was not gone. He was merely moving his court to the spirit world, and he would need every comfort and servant to rule there effectively. Herodotus, the Greek historian, recorded their royal funeral rites in chilling detail, a ceremony that unfolded with the grim precision of a sacred script. When a chieftain died, the first act was one of grotesque preservation. His body was not buried, it was embalmed. The Scythians would slit the corpse open, clean out the internal organs, and carefully fill the cavity with a mixture of crushed herbs, aromatic spices, and fragrant cedar shavings. They would then sew the body shut and cover it completely in wax. This process created a kind of permanent, fragrant effigy, a vessel that could endure the long farewell to come. For the embalmed king was not yet ready for the earth. His body was placed upright on a ceremonial wagon. Then began a macabre royal progress. The wagon, bearing its silent passenger, was taken on a journey through all the lands and subject tribes of the deceased king's realm. At each stop, the local chieftains and their people would come to pay homage. They would cut their own hair, slash their arms and faces in bloody grief, and feast in the king's honor. This procession could last for 40 days, a mobile theater of mourning that reinforced political bonds and demonstrated the king's enduring presence even in death. After the long journey, the procession arrived at the chosen burial ground in the kingdom's heartland. Here, the Scythians would excavate a vast square pit. This was the foundation for the kurgan, the great burial mound that would dominate the landscape for millennia. Within this chamber, they constructed a miniature wooden palace for the afterlife. The wax-covered king was laid upon a couch within this subterranean hall, surrounded by his most prized possessions, golden cups, ornate weaponry, and fine clothing. Then came the most harrowing phase of the ritual, the creation of his eternal retinue. The king's cupbearer, his cook, his stable master, and his personal bodyguard were all ritually strangled and placed in the tomb. So too were several of his concubines. Their deaths were not seen as murder, but as a promotion, a sacred duty to continue their service beyond the veil. Finally, his horses were killed. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of these prized animals were slaughtered and arranged in neat rows around the tomb's perimeter, a cavalry ready for the king to command in the world of spirits. With the tomb stocked and sealed, the earth was heaped over it, creating the massive, grassy kurgan. But the ceremony was not yet complete for the living. A final purifying rite remained. The Scythians would take 3 poles and lean them together into a tripod, covering the structure with thick woolen felt to create a small, sealed tent. Inside, they placed a dish of red-hot stones. Then, the most noble of the surviving tribesmen would crawl inside. They would take hemp seeds, cast them onto the blazing stones, and inhale the thick, fragrant smoke that billowed up. Herodotus writes that they would howl with pleasure in the vapor-filled tent. This cannabis inhalation was a ritual of cleansing and communion. It purified the participants from the pollution of death and, in their altered state, allowed them to feel a final, ecstatic connection with the spirit of the departed king. They emerged not just cleansed but convinced the ceremony was now a success. They had not buried a corpse. They had installed a powerful ancestor, a watchful spirit lord in a subterranean palace, surrounded by his faithful court and his thundering herd of horses. His kurgan would stand as a permanent reminder and a source of protective power. Every time a tribesman passed that great earthen mound on the endless steppe, he would know his king was still there, ruling, waiting, and guarding the people from the shadows of the other world. The Scythian king rode into the afterlife with his strangled court, but in the sunlit hills of ancient Italy, a different kind of court awaited, a verdict, one written in the glistening entrails of a sheep. For the Etruscans, masters of metal and mystery, the most vital state secrets were not found in scrolls or speeches, but in the warm, complex organ of a freshly sacrificed animal. This 13th forgotten ceremony is haruspicy, a science of the sacred so precise it required a literal map of the heavens cast in bronze. The ritual began with the selection of a perfect animal, typically a healthy sheep. It was led to a consecrated altar, its coat clean, its demeanor calm. The presiding ritualist, the haruspice, was not a wild-eyed shaman, but a highly trained elite technician. His expertise was in reading the divine script, and he approached his work with the solemn focus of a surgeon. After prayers and libations, the animal was swiftly and ritually slaughtered. The moment of truth came immediately. The haruspice would carefully open the carcass and extract the liver, the organ believed to be the seat of life and consciousness. He would not glance at it and pronounce a vague omen. His inspection was methodical, almost obsessive. Cradling the heavy, blood-slick organ in his hands, he would examine every detail. He noted the size and shape of the 5 lobes. He searched for discolorations, unusual bumps or cysts. The texture, the firmness, the very pattern of the blood vessels, all were data points in a celestial code. A malformation on the gate lobe might signal a threat to the city's defenses. A spot on the seat of the gods lobe could indicate divine displeasure with a proposed treaty. But how did he know which part of the liver corresponded to which god or aspect of fate? This is where the Etruscans demonstrated their breathtaking systematization of the divine. They used a physical reference manual, a bronze model of a sheep's liver. The most famous surviving example is the Piacenza liver, a life-sized bronze artifact from the 2nd century before the Common Era. Its surface is not smooth. It is divided into dozens of tiny, inscribed compartments, each labeled with the name of an Etruscan deity. This object was not a piece of art, it was a functional tool, a topographic map of the cosmos itself. The haruspex would hold the real liver in one hand and compare it point by point to the bronze model in the other. The model organized the heavens into 16 regions, each ruled by specific gods. By matching the marks on the actual organ to their corresponding divine neighborhood on the model, the haruspex could pinpoint not just whether the gods were happy or angry, but which god was speaking and about what specific matter. It was a form of divine GPS. Imagine the scene in an Etruscan council chamber. The city's leaders, debating whether to go to war or consecrate a new temple, would fall silent as the haruspex entered, bearing his grim evidence. All eyes would be on him as he performed his silent, bloody comparison. His eventual pronouncement was not a suggestion. It was a report of the god's explicit will, deciphered from a biological text. This ceremony was the bedrock of Etruscan public life, guiding everything from military campaigns to agricultural policy. Its influence did not die with their civilization. The Romans, both fascinated and intimidated by Etruscan religious depth, adopted the practice wholesale. Roman generals would regularly employ haruspices before battle, seeking that same certainty written in visceral form. In that quiet, focused examination, the Etruscans believed they had found the ultimate user manual for reality, a way to translate the chaotic whispers of the divine into a clear, actionable plan, all by reading the map of the sky mirrored in a sheep's liver. The liver was a map of the present, but the truest renewal came from a promise of light after the longest night. In the highlands of ancient Persia, the Zoroastrian ritualists orchestrated a ceremony that was not a plea to the gods, but a celebration of a cosmic victory already won. This is Nowruz, the Persian New Year, a festival of fire and rebirth whose roots stretch back over 3,000 years. For the followers of the prophet Zarathustra, the universe was a battlefield between two fundamental forces, Ahura Mazda, the lord of wisdom and light, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of destruction and darkness. Nowruz, meaning new day, marked the moment the sun crossed the celestial equator, the spring equinox. This was not just a change of season. It was the annual, tangible triumph of light over darkness, order over chaos, and life over stagnation. The ceremony was a meticulous, joyous reenactment of this victory, and its preparation began weeks in advance with a ritual known as kune takune, literally, shaking the house. Every home underwent a profound spring cleaning. Carpets were beaten, curtains washed, and every corner purged of dust. This was not mere housekeeping. It was a spiritual cleansing, a physical expulsion of the old year's accumulated darkness and lethargy, making space for the fresh, vibrant energy of the new. The climax of the domestic ritual was the setting of the Haft-Sin table. This was a symbolic altar of 7 items, each beginning with the Persian letter Sin, and each representing a hope for the coming year. Sabze, sprouted wheat or lentils, symbolized rebirth. Sib, apples, stood for health and beauty. Senged, dried olaster fruit, represented love. Sir, garlic was for medicine and protection. Somak, sumac berries evoked the sunrise. Sirke, vinegar, symbolized age and patience. And Samonu, a sweet pudding, embodied wealth and fertility. Arranged with a mirror, candles, and goldfish, the table was a microcosm of a perfect, abundant, and ethically ordered world. But the true heart of Nowruz, its defining element, was fire. In Zoroastrian temples, priests maintained an eternal flame, a direct symbol of Ahura Mazda's divine light and wisdom that must never be extinguished. For the public celebration, this sacred fire was brought to the people. On the last Wednesday before the equinox, communities would light great bonfires on hilltops and in public squares. The flames reached for the darkening sky, beacons of the coming victory. Then came the act of personal purification, Chahashand Suri, the festival of fire jumping. People of all ages would line up and leap over the flames, chanting a traditional rhyme that translated to, "Give me your beautiful red color and take back my sickly pallor." This was not a dare, it was a transformative exchange. The fire, pure and purifying, would take their weariness, their sickness, and their misfortunes, and in return, grant them its own vitality, warmth, and health. The smoke carried their impurities away. After the fires died down, families would gather for communal feasts, sharing sweets and special dishes, visiting one another to renew bonds and settle old disputes. The entire 13-day festival was a sustained, collective effort to align human life with the cosmic shift toward light. It wove together domestic order, communal joy, and sacred symbolism into a single, powerful statement. That renewal was not a passive hope, but an active ritual duty. By cleaning their homes, setting their tables, and jumping through the sacred flames, every person participated in the eternal work of the universe, helping to ensure that light would, once again, conquer the dark. While Zoroastrian fire celebrated a public victory of light, a far more secretive flame burned in underground chambers across the Roman Empire. The 15th forgotten ceremony belongs to the cult of Mithras, a mystery religion whose rituals were so closely guarded that no written scripture has ever been found. We know its secrets only through archaeology and the whispers of its enemies, piecing together a puzzle from scattered Mithria, the long, narrow sanctuaries built to resemble caves. At the far end of every Mithrium stood the central icon, the Tauroctony, a carved relief of the god Mithras in his distinctive Phrygian cap, kneeling on the back of a great bull, plunging a dagger into its shoulder. This was not mere decoration, it was a cosmic map, and every element was a coded star. The bull was Taurus, the scorpion that often stings its genitals is Scorpio. The dog and snake that lap at the blood are Canis Minor and Hydra. The entire scene is a precise celestial diagram, depicting Mithras not as a simple bull slayer, but as a divine agent unlocking the heavens, sacrificing the constellation Taurus to release life-giving forces and ensure the orderly procession of the stars. To understand this symbol was to begin the journey. Membership was fiercely exclusive, open only to men, often soldiers, merchants, and bureaucrats who craved a personal promise of salvation and strength. Initiates progressed through 7 grueling grades, each named and each with its own symbolic ordeal. The first was Korax the Raven, a messenger between worlds. An initiate might be blindfolded, hands bound, and pushed through a dark, narrow passage, physically experiencing disorientation before the light of knowledge. The second grade, Nymphus or Bride, involved symbolic marriage to the god, a ritual of spiritual union. The third, Miles the Soldier, required a solemn oath of loyalty. The candidate might be presented with a crown on a sword's point, which he had to push away, declaring Mithras as his only crown. The trials grew more intense. For the grade of Leo, the lion, associated with the element of fire, initiates may have had their hands purified with honey, their tongues washed, and been subjected to heat and smoke to simulate a fiery purification. The highest grades, like Perses, the Persian, and Heliodromus, the Sun Runner, brought the initiate closer to the cosmic truths of the Tauroctony itself. One particularly vivid account from Christian critics describes a terrifying rite of symbolic death and rebirth. The initiate was placed in a pit covered by a wooden grate. A bull was slaughtered on the grate above, drenching the man below in a torrent of warm blood and entrails. He would then emerge, reborn into the cult, having been washed in the vital life force of the sacred animal. Whether this precise ritual occurred is debated, but the theme of rebirth through a bloody ordeal is consistent. After such trials, the community gathered for the sacred meal, the syndection. Seated on stone benches along the Mithraeum, they would share ritual bread and wine, reenacting a feast held by Mithras and the sun god Sol after the great bull slaying. This communal meal forged an unbreakable bond among these men, a brotherhood united by shared secrets and the conviction that they had aligned themselves with the very machinery of the cosmos. In the flickering lamp light of those underground temples, they believed they held the key to navigating life, death, and a promised journey through the stars. The underground brotherhood of Mithras sought salvation in secret, but the most terrifying spectacles of the ancient world were designed for everyone to see. Julius Caesar, in his account of the Gallic Wars, describes a ceremony so shocking it has seared itself into the Western imagination: the Celtic Wicker Man sacrifice. He writes that the Druids, the spiritual and intellectual elite of the Gauls, would construct a colossal effigy of a man, woven from pliable willow branches into a hollow, cage-like form. This giant wicker colossus was then filled with living victims, criminals, prisoners of war, or perhaps even volunteers, along with every manner of livestock and valuable goods. At a signal, the Druids would set the entire structure ablaze. The screaming inferno, visible for miles, was a single, catastrophic offering to the gods, most likely Teutates, the tribal protector, or Ceremonies, the god of thunder. Caesar presents it as a fact of Celtic barbarity, a chilling justification for Roman conquest. But how much of this is history and how much is propaganda? The Romans had a vested interest in painting the Celts as savage, superstitious monsters who needed the civilizing hand of Rome. No archaeological evidence of a giant wicker man has ever been found. Yet, the absence of a wooden structure which would have completely decomposed does not disprove the ritual's core. We must look to other evidence. The Celts held major seasonal festivals, and a sacrifice of this magnitude would fit the scale of Beltane, the spring festival marking the beginning of the pastoral summer. The purpose would be stark and logical: to guarantee the fertility of the land and the success of the herds by offering the gods a massive, concentrated gift of life, wealth, and spirit. It could also have been a wartime rite, a desperate attempt to secure victory by offering the enemy's captured warriors to the tribal gods. While the Wicker Man itself remains elusive, archaeology provides grim, tangible proof that the Celts did practice human sacrifice. The bog bodies of northern Europe, those eerily preserved corpses found in peat marshes, tell a story that chills the blood. Take the case of Lindoman, discovered in England. His death was a ritual sequence. He was struck on the head, garroted with a sinew cord to crush his throat, and his jugular was slit, all in quick succession. A classic threefold death that scholars link to offerings to three different deities. His last meal was a charred griddle cake, suggesting a ceremonial feast. He was not a victim of crime, but of a sacred act. Similarly, the body of old Croghan Man from Ireland shows signs of deliberate, ritualized killing and deposition in a boundary bog, a liminal space between worlds. These are not the casualties of battle. They are carefully orchestrated offerings, individuals chosen, perhaps for their high status or specific physical perfection, to serve as messengers or permanent gifts to the gods of the earth and water. The Wicker Man, whether a literal practice or a Roman exaggeration of sacrificial scale, crystallizes the profound otherness of the Druids in the Roman mind. They were not just priests, they were judges, teachers, and astronomers who held the power of life and death. A ceremony that could command the construction of a giant, living pyre demonstrated an authority that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It represented a piety so absolute, so willing to engage in the ultimate transaction, that it defied Roman understanding. In that roaring fire, whether real or imagined, the Romans saw the dark reflection of their own disciplined order, a world where faith demanded not just prayer, but a towering, screaming inferno of proof. The Druids' fire was a beacon seen for miles, but the greatest altar ever built was one its creators could never see in full. Across the bone-dry plains of southern Peru, the Nazca people inscribed a mystery into the very skin of the desert. These are the Nazca lines, geoglyphs so vast they form a sacred landscape only comprehensible from the sky. The hummingbird's wings stretch over 300 feet. The spider's legs are precise, geometric lines. The monkey's spiraling tail is a perfect coil. For decades, we have asked how they were made, but the deeper question is why. These were not static art. They were the stage for the 17th forgotten ceremony, a ritual procession where the people walked the very bodies of the gods to beg for the one thing the desert denied them: water. The ritual likely began long before the first foot touched the line. A shaman, the spiritual intermediary, would prepare through fasting and prayer. Central to this preparation was likely the brew of the San Pedro cactus, a tall, columnar plant native to the Andes. Containing mescaline, this powerful psychotropic was known as the plant teacher. By drinking its bitter liquid, the shaman could enter a profound trance state, a bridge between the world of humans and the world of huacas, the spirits residing in mountains, springs, and the sky itself. In this altered consciousness, the shaman might have received the vision or the instruction for the ceremony to come. Then the community would gather. They would not see the hummingbird or the spider as we do from an airplane window. From ground level, they would see only a shallow, cleared pathway of reddish-brown earth, bordered by stones stretching toward the horizon. Their faith was not in the image, but in the act of walking it. The procession itself was the prayer. Led by the trancing shaman, the people would have walked in single file along the precise, unerring lines. To walk the line of the hummingbird was to inhabit the spirit of a creature that drinks from flowers, a direct symbol of life-giving nectar. To trace the spider, a creature associated in Andean belief with rain and fertility, was to weave a connection with the forces that bring water. The monkey, an animal of the lush eastern forests, was a walking invocation for that same verdant life to come to the desert. Each step was a vibration, a deliberate tracing of a celestial pattern onto the earth, meant to attract the attention of the mountain deities like the Apus, who controlled the weather, and the sky gods who held the rain. The lines themselves may have functioned as ritual pathways leading to points where underground aquifers surfaced or where offerings could be made. Along the way, the people likely carried offerings, spondylus shells from the distant ocean, precious textiles, or gourds of chicha, maize beer poured into the dry earth as a libation. They were not drawing pictures for posterity. They were performing acupuncture on the landscape, stimulating specific spiritual meridians to coax water from a reluctant sky. The ceremony's power lay in its inversion of perspective. The people on the ground moved with focused, localized intent, believing their actions were tracing sacred forms only visible to the gods above. From their vantage point on the mountaintops or in the spirit world, the deities would look down and see their own symbols perfectly rendered, a sign of devotion and an unmistakable plea. The shaman, deep in his cactus-induced journey, served as the live wire between these two realms, his chants and visions guiding the community's steps and interpreting any signs from the spirits. It was a collaborative act of creation and supplication where the entire community became the ritualist, their footprints a collective signature on a contract written to the heavens. When the rains finally came, carving gentle rivulets through the desert, it was not luck. It was the proof that the ceremony had worked, that the giant hummingbird had flown, the spider had woven, and the monkey's tail had spun the world back into balance. They left no temples, only pathways for gods to follow, a permanent invitation etched into the earth, waiting for the next season of desperate, hopeful walking. The Nazca walked their prayers into the desert, but in the quiet forests of ancient Japan, a different kind of wandering demanded a gentler touch. A spirit, or mitama, was not a fixed entity. It was a vital essence that could fragment, stray, or become agitated, causing misfortune for both the living and the dead. The 18th forgotten ceremony, the Sai, was a ritual of profound compassion and precision, a sacred operation to find and soothe a lost soul. At its core was a simple, beautiful belief that a troubled spirit could be called home, calmed, and made whole again. The ritualist, a Shinto priest, would begin by purifying the space and himself, creating a pristine container for the delicate work ahead. His primary tool was the gohei, a sacred wand. At first glance, it appears simple, a wooden stick with zigzagging paper streamers attached, but in the priest's hands it became a powerful instrument. The white paper strips, cut in a specific pattern, were believed to attract and channel spiritual energy. By waving the gohei in slow, deliberate motions over the person or object associated with the wandering spirit, the priest was visually tracing a path for it to follow, a luminous beacon in the unseen world. The ceremony was not performed in silence. It was accompanied by the ancient hypnotic sounds of Kagura, music and dance dedicated to the gods. The slow, rhythmic beat of drums and the haunting melody of a flute or koto created a sonic field, a vibrational net to catch the attention of the disoriented Mitama. Dancers moving with deliberate, flowing gestures further defined the sacred space, their movements acting as a living map to guide the spirit back to stability. Then came the most focused act, the Tama Fury, the spirit shaking. The priest would take a special box, often containing symbolic objects or sometimes a long, sacred rope. Holding it firmly, he would begin to shake it with a steady, rhythmic intensity. This was not a random motion. The shaking was believed to generate a specific kind of spiritual vibration, a resonant frequency that would attract the scattered or agitated essence. Think of it as a kind of divine sonar, a pulse sent out into the spiritual ether, calling the lost part home. Once the spirit was believed to be drawn near and contained within the ritual focus, the shaking would gradually slow, then cease entirely. This gentle settling was the culmination. The Mitama, now pacified, was guided back to its proper place, whether within a recently deceased person awaiting peaceful transition, or within a living individual suffering from spiritual sickness, manifesting as deep melancholy, sudden illness, or a streak of inexplicable bad luck. The Sai was ultimately a ceremony of healing and reintegration. It acknowledged that trauma, grief, or violent death could shatter the soul's integrity, and it offered a ritual technology to mend that fracture. For the living, it restored balance and well-being. For the dead, it ensured they could become a benevolent ancestor, a calm protector rather than a restless ghost. In the sway of the gohei, the beat of the drum, and the careful shake of the priest's hands, we see an ancient answer to a timeless human fear. Not the fear of spirits, but the fear of a spirit lost, and the gentle, determined craft of bringing it back to peace. The gentle call of the Sai sought to mend a single soul, but in the heart of Central Asia, an entire civilization's survival depended on a river's grace. On the banks of the vital Oxus River, in a region the Greeks called Bactria, archaeologists uncovered a temple that whispered of a forgotten hybrid faith. The Oxus Temple, dating to the first millennium before the Common Era, did not yield grand statues or towering altars. Instead, its sacred deposits held something more intimate and revealing, a miniature world of devotion. Dozens of tiny gold and silver chariots, no larger than a hand, were found carefully placed. Alongside them were delicate figurines of horses, riders, and noblemen, and an array of small, intricate vessels. These were not toys, they were perfect, precious models crafted as eternal votive gifts for the gods. To hold one is to feel the weight of a personal plea, scaled down to a size meant for divine hands. The rituals here were likely intimate yet vital, focused on the lifeblood of the region, the Oxus River itself. We can reconstruct the ceremony from these silent objects and the cultural currents that flowed through this Silk Road crossroads. A worshipper, perhaps a wealthy merchant or a local landowner, would arrive at the temple with a specific petition. In his hands, he carried a meticulously crafted gold chariot, a symbol of status, mobility, and perhaps a prayer for safe travel along the treacherous trade routes. The ceremony would begin with purification. A Zoroastrian-inspired fire representing the supreme deity Ahura Mazda's divine light would have burned on an altar. The priest, likely versed in multiple religious traditions, might have added aromatic sandalwood or myrrh, sending fragrant smoke skyward as an initial offering. Then came the central act, the preparation and offering of Hayama. This was a sacred, mildly psychoactive drink made from a pressed plant, likely ephedra, mixed with milk and water. The ritual straining of the Hayama through a sieve was itself a holy act, separating the pure, invigorating essence from the solid matter. The priest would pour libations onto the fire, where the liquid would hiss and steam, and onto the earth near the riverbank, directly nourishing the land. Drinking the Hayama was believed to grant vision and vitality, bridging the gap between the human and divine realms. Following this, the worshipper would present his miniature chariot or figurine. With solemn prayers, perhaps invoking both the Zoroastrian Yazatas or beneficent spirits and local river deities, the object would be ritually killed for divine use. A small hole might be punched in it, or it would be ceremonially broken. It was then deposited in a sacred pit or a dedicated repository within the temple grounds, a permanent physical placeholder for the prayer it carried. This act of deposition transformed the object. It was no longer a possession, it was a conduit left in the god's care as a perpetual reminder of a human need. The true power of this ceremony lay in its syncretic blend of beliefs. This was not a purely Zoroastrian rite, nor a purely Mesopotamian one. It was a local recipe for salvation. The fire altar and the Hayama drink point clearly to Zoroastrian influence from the Persian Empire to the west. Yet the very concept of depositing votive figurines echoes much older Mesopotamian traditions, where worshippers left stone statues of themselves in temples to perpetually pray on their behalf. The miniature chariots themselves might reflect a local nomadic pastoral culture that venerated the horse and chariot as supreme symbols of power and prestige. The Oxus temple ritual was a pragmatic fusion. The people of Bactria were not concerned with theological purity, they were concerned with results. They gathered the most potent rituals from the world they knew, Persian fire, Mesopotamian votives, local symbols, and combined them into a single, powerful ceremony aimed at the most important force in their lives, the relentless, life-giving flow of the Oxus River. Their prayers, cast in gold and silver and left in the dark earth, were for fertility, for the river's banks to overflow with just the right abundance, and for the trade routes that followed its course to remain prosperous and secure. In that quiet act of offering a tiny chariot, a vast network of faith and survival converged, hoping to steer the forces of nature toward mercy. Gold chariots and river prayers were acts of hope, but the March of Peru's north coast faced a terror that demanded a far darker currency. Their ceremony, number 20, was a sacrificial rite of such graphic, formalized violence that it has been preserved in stunning detail on their ceramic vessels, a library of blood and belief. The Moch lived in a landscape of stark contrasts between fertile river valleys and the encroaching desert, a balance perpetually threatened by the capricious power of the Pacific Ocean. Their gods were not distant, they were forces of nature that required constant, potent payment, and the most potent offering was a human life, given in a meticulously choreographed drama. The ceremony began not with a victim, but with a contest. Two elite warriors, clad in elaborate ritual armor and helmets depicting fearsome animals or deities, would engage in a one-on-one combat. This was not a battle to the death in the arena. It was a structured, ceremonial duel, likely fought with maces and shields, where the objective was capture. The loser, disarmed and subdued, would be bound with ropes. His fate was sealed, but his role was only beginning. he was not treated as a criminal or a despised enemy. In a startling twist, his captors would then care for him. Over a period of weeks or even months, the prisoner was fed and ritually prepared, perhaps even given a form of status, as he was groomed to become the ultimate vessel for the community's plea. The climax of the ceremony was a public spectacle held at a towering pyramid temple. The bound prisoner, possibly weakened by ritual intoxication from corn beer or San Pedro cactus, was paraded before priests and a gathered audience. The high priest, adorned in magnificent regalia, would then take a sharp, crescent-bladed ceremonial knife known as a tumi. With a single, practiced motion, he would slash the prisoner's throat. The blood was the entire point. As it gushed forth, assistant priests caught it in tall, elegant goblets. These goblets were not crude bowls. They were exquisite works of art, often shaped like human heads or decorated with scenes of the very ritual they facilitated. The consumption of the blood by the priests was the next critical step. They did not drink it for sustenance, but as a sacred act of channeling. By ingesting the vital life force, they believed they were transferring its power, concentrating it within themselves as intermediaries. Finally, they would raise the goblet skyward, offering this concentrated essence to the principal deity, a fearsome figure often called the Decapitator by archaeologists. This god, part human, part animal, and part sea creature, held dominion over the forces that could unleash or withhold the water necessary for life. The purpose of this gruesome theater was not cruelty for its own sake, but a terrifying form of environmental management. The Moch lived under the constant shadow of El Niño, the climatic phenomenon that could bring decades of drought or, conversely, catastrophic floods and mudslides that would wipe out entire valleys in a single rainy season. The sacrificial ceremony was a desperate attempt at negotiation. The blood of a strong, ritually potent warrior was the highest value offering they could conceive. By presenting it to the mountain and weather gods, they believed they were appeasing these volatile forces, buying another season of balance, preventing the ocean from boiling over and the mountains from washing away. In their eyes, the death of one, executed with solemn precision, was a tragic but necessary transaction to save the many. The ceremony transforms human sacrifice from a vague notion of barbarity into a chillingly logical, communal survival strategy where art, warfare, and religion fused into a single, bloody prayer for rain. The Moch's blood offering was a transaction with a named, terrifying god. But in the stark theology of ancient Israel, the greatest threat was not a deity to be appeased, but an impurity that had to be physically expelled. The 21st forgotten ceremony is the ritual of the scapegoat, or Azazel, the heart of the most solemn day in the Hebrew calendar, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This was not a public festival, but a private, terrifying ordeal performed once a year by a single man, the high priest, within the sacred and deadly confines of the tabernacle, and later, the temple in Jerusalem. His task was nothing less than the purification of an entire nation, and the mechanism was a pair of goats. The ceremony began with the high priest's own purification. He would bathe and dress in simple, pure white linen garments, setting aside his glorious golden vestments. This humility was essential, for he was about to enter the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber where the very presence of God dwelled, a place so sacred that to enter it unprepared meant instant death. Only on this one day, and only after meticulous ritual washing and sacrifice for his own sins, could he pass through the veil. Before that ultimate moment, however, he confronted the two goats. They were to be as identical as possible, chosen by lot. The lot was cast onto the two animals, one for Yahweh and one for Azazel. The goat designated for Yahweh was then led away and sacrificed as a standard sin offering, its blood later to be brought into the Holy of Holies by the priest. But the second goat, the one for Azazel, awaited a far more mysterious fate. The high priest would now lay both hands upon the head of this live goat. In a gesture of immense symbolic weight, he would confess aloud all the iniquities, transgressions, and sins of the people of Israel. This was not a general prayer. The ancient texts describe a precise verbal transference. As the priest recited the litany of wrongs, the sins of the community were understood to be transferred from the people through the priest and onto the animal itself. The goat became a living container burdened with the moral filth of a nation. Then came the act of expulsion. This goat, now deemed utterly unclean and dangerous, was not sacrificed. It was handed over to a designated man, someone waiting for this grim task. This man would lead the sin-laden animal out of the camp, out of the city, and into the wilderness, a place of chaos and danger opposed to the order of the community. The destination was for Azazel. The meaning of Azazel is fiercely debated. It might refer to a demon or a wilderness spirit, a personification of the forces of evil and desolation. Or it might simply mean the goat that goes away, referring to a desolate, rocky precipice. Tradition holds that the man leading the goat would eventually push it off a cliff, ensuring it could never wander back and re-enter the community with its terrible cargo. The symbolism is profound and visceral. Evil and sin were not merely forgiven in an abstract sense. They were visualized as a tangible contamination that could be loaded onto a beast and banished to a place of non-existence. The goat for Yahweh, sacrificed at the altar, dealt with the offense against divine law. The goat for Azazel dealt with the consequence of that offense, the lingering spiritual pollution that clung to the people and their land. One goat addressed the debt, the other removed the stain. The entire ceremony was a masterpiece of ritual psychology. It provided a powerful, cathartic conclusion to the annual cycle of sin and repentance. The people waiting outside would see the goat led away, watching their collective guilt literally walk out of sight into the barren hills, never to return. It was the ultimate act of collective spiritual cleansing, a fresh start purchased not with gold or grain, but with the focused, terrifying ritual work of one man who risked his life to make the community clean again. In that driven goat, we see an ancient answer to a universal human yearning, to be truly, finally, rid of the weight we carry. The goat vanished into the wilderness, carrying away a nation's sins. But in the rose-red cliffs of Petra, a different kind of removal was necessary, a deliberate ascent to meet the gods on their own terms. Carved into the very summits of the mountains surrounding their hidden city, the Nabateans built their altars in the sky. These are the high places, remote sanctuaries accessible only by exhausting climbs up narrow, rock-cut staircases. The journey itself was the first act of the ritual, a physical purification through effort, leaving the mundane world of trade and commerce far below. Reaching the summit, the ritualists found a stark, open-air temple hewn directly from the mountain's crown. The centerpiece was a broad, flat altar slab, often with a shallow channel carved around its edge leading to a spout. This was not for decoration. It was a practical, grim conduit. The chosen animal, likely a prized camel from their vast caravans or a flawless sheep, would be led onto the rock. After prayers and invocations, its throat was cut in a swift ritual act. The blood, the most potent life force, would gush across the stone, flow into the carved channel, and drain away through the spout, perhaps into a waiting vessel or onto the sacred earth below. This careful channeling shows a profound respect for the offering. Not a drop of this sacred liquid was to be wasted or treated casually. As the blood drained, other offerings filled the air. In small, square niches carved into the rock walls, priests would burn lumps of frankincense and myrrh, the very commodities that built the Nabatean kingdom. The sweet, resinous smoke would curl into the thin, high-altitude air, a fragrant bridge between the earthly and the divine. Libations of wine or precious water, drawn from the ingenious cisterns that allowed Petra to thrive in the desert, would be poured onto the altar or into dedicated basins, completing the sensory suite of sacrifice, the metallic scent of blood, the heady perfume of incense, the sharp tang of wine. The purpose of this demanding ceremony was directly tied to the source of all Nabatean wealth, the caravan trade. Their gods, like the powerful Dashara, the lord of the mountains, and Al-Azza, a goddess of power and protection, were the unseen guardians of the trade routes. A merchant setting out on a months-long journey across the Arabian desert faced bandits, sandstorms, and thirst. The sacrifice on the high place was a preemptive transaction. By offering the finest of their livestock and their most valuable aromatics in a place as close to the heavens as they could physically reach, the Nabateans were paying for divine insurance. They sought clear passage, favorable winds, and protection for their goods and their lives. The remote location was not an inconvenience, it was the entire point. In the silence of those mountaintops, far above the bustling sick and the crowded tombs, they believed they could bypass the noise of the world and place their plea directly into the ears of the gods. Every step of the climb, every drop of blood channeled away, every wisp of expensive smoke was a line item in a sacred contract, ensuring that the lifeblood of their civilization, the flow of spices, silks, and incense, would continue to course safely through the veins of the desert. The desert mountain of Jebel Barkal rises from the Nile's banks like a jagged crown, a natural monument the ancient Kushites called the Pure Mountain. For the rulers of the kingdom of Kush, this was not just a landmark, it was the divine seat of power, the dwelling place of the great god Ammon himself. And it was here, at this sacred site deep within their Nubian homeland, that they performed a ceremony of breathtaking audacity, the coronation of a Kushite king as the rightful pharaoh of Egypt. This was not a simple political claim. It was a ritual of profound spiritual legitimacy, a direct challenge to the very heart of Egyptian tradition performed on Kushite soil. The journey to kingship began with a pilgrimage. The newly chosen ruler would travel south along the Nile, leaving the conquered lands of Egypt behind, moving toward the spiritual source of his authority. His destination was the temple complex carved into the base of Jebel Barkal, a site the Egyptians themselves had revered as the southern home of Ammon. The mountain's distinctive pinnacle, a sheer sandstone spire, was seen as a giant natural uraeus, the sacred cobra that adorned the pharaoh's brow. To stand before it was to stand in the presence of the god's own protective power. The climax of the ceremony unfolded within the mountain's great temple. After days of purification and preparatory rites, the king would enter the dim, incense-filled sanctuary. The air would have been thick with anticipation, the only light flickering from oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on walls covered in reliefs of gods and kings. At the heart of this space stood the cult statue of Ammon, a figure believed to be inhabited by the god's living spirit. This was the moment of transference. In a ritual that directly mirrored yet subverted Egyptian practice, the Kushite king would approach the statue. According to inscriptions and carvings, the god himself would act. In a miraculous moment, the statue of Ammon was believed to reach out and place the crown upon the king's head. This was not a metaphor. The Kushites claimed a direct physical investiture by the deity. Priests may have facilitated the act using hidden mechanisms or through carefully staged ritual theater, but for all present, the truth was absolute. Ammon of Jebel Barkal had chosen this man, had anointed him, and had granted him the dual crowns of Kush and Egypt. This ceremony was a masterstroke of political and spiritual strategy. By receiving the crown from Ammon in Kush, the king rooted his pharaonic authority not in the captured temples of Thebes or Memphis, but in the original southern font of the god's power. It turned Egyptian theology on its head. They were not foreign conquerors usurping a throne. They were the true heirs returning to the source to reclaim a kingship that had, in their view, been neglected by the northern rulers. The ritual declared that the legitimate pharaoh was not who controlled the Nile Delta, but who held the blessing of Ammon of the Pure Mountain. Every element of the coronation, from the anointing oils to the recitation of royal titles, was a precise copy of Egyptian custom but performed with a Nubian accent. It was the ultimate act of cultural appropriation, a way of saying, we understand your power better than you do, and now it is ours by divine right. The ceremony at Jebel Barkal did not just make a king. It manufactured a pharaoh, forging a hybrid identity that allowed the Kushites to rule Egypt for nearly a century as its 25th dynasty. They walked into a mountain as Kushite princes and emerged as living gods, their authority etched not just in law, but in the very rock their people considered the navel of the world. The mountain coronation forged a king through divine touch, but the most sought-after transformation in the ancient world required a pilgrim's weary feet and a willing heart. For over 1,000 years, from the shadows of the Bronze Age to the twilight of the Roman Empire, a single promise drew countless souls to a small town near Athens, freedom from the terror of death. This was the power of the Eleusinian Mysteries, a secret initiation so profound that its final revelation was never, ever written down. The ceremony began not in darkness, but in the brilliant sunlight of Athens. Each autumn, thousands of initiates or mystai gathered from across the Greco-Roman world. They were not priests or nobles by default, but everyday people, men, women, and even slaves united by a shared yearning. Their journey was a sacred echo. They formed a solemn procession and began walking the 12-mile sacred way to the town of Eleusis, retracing the steps of the goddess Demeter in her mythic grief. Along the dusty road, they carried little statues of a divine child, and their voices rose in a strange, ecstatic cry, Iach, O Iach, a call to the god of the ritual's joyful aspect. This was not a quiet pilgrimage, but a moving theater of raw emotion. Upon reaching Eleusis, the initiates entered a period of strict ritual fasting, mirroring Demeter's own refusal of food and drink as she mourned her daughter Persephone, kidnapped into the underworld. This physical deprivation was a crucial preparation, hollowing out the ordinary self to make room for the divine. Then they broke their fast with a single, potent substance, the kykeon. This was a humble barley potion mixed with water and pennyroyal mint, but in the ritual context it was anything but ordinary. Scholars have long debated its properties. Some suggest the barley used might have been contaminated with ergot, a fungus containing compounds related to LSD, which could induce powerful visions. Others argue its power was purely symbolic, a sacred meal that connected the initiates to Demeter, who, in the myth, broke her own fast with kykeon. Either way, drinking it was the key that unlocked the gates of perception, preparing the mind and body for what was to come. As night fell, the mystai entered the heart of the mystery, the telesterion. This was a vast square hall capable of holding thousands, with rows of steps for seating and a small, roofed sanctuary at its center. What happened inside has been guarded by a silence so complete that even the voluminous gossip of ancient writers never betrayed it. The penalty for disclosure was death, and the secret held. Yet from fragments and hints we can glimpse the ritual's contours. It was almost certainly a dramatic reenactment of the myth of Demeter and Persephone, the mother's desperate search, the daughter's descent into the realm of Hades, and a joyous cyclical return each spring. Priests and priestesses likely took the roles of the gods, performing a sacred play in the flickering torchlight. At a pivotal moment, the Hierophant, the chief priest, would emerge from the inner sanctuary. His title means he who shows the holy things, and he did. In a blinding flash of light, he revealed the most sacred objects of the cult. We do not know what they were, a sheaf of wheat, a stone, a divine image, but their display, called the epopteia or beholding, was the climax. This was not passive watching, it was an intense personal visual revelation, a shock of understanding that bypassed reason and struck directly at the soul. The experience defies modern description. Initiates who wrote about it, like the orator Cicero, spoke only in general terms of its supreme value. They said that in that hall they learned the ultimate truths about human life and death. The promise was explicit and revolutionary. By undergoing the trials, witnessing the sacred drama, and receiving the epopteia, an initiate was released from the ancient primal fear of the afterlife. Death was not an end, but a transition to a blessed state in the Elysian fields, a fate far brighter than the shadowy, meaningless existence promised in common Greek belief. The mysteries did not offer theological doctrines to believe, but a transformative experience to undergo. You did not learn about the goddesses, you walked with them, fasted with them, and emerged reborn. When the initiates finally streamed out of the telesterion at dawn, they were fundamentally changed. They carried with them a quiet, unshakable certainty, a secret comfort that would last a lifetime. They had seen the great pattern of loss and return, of death and rebirth, played out not just in a story, but within their very souls. In a world shadowed by uncertainty, they now possessed the one thing everyone desired, a light to carry into the dark. But the ultimate secret revealed at Eleusis was not a thing to be seen, but a feeling to be shared. In the close, torch-lit confines of the Mithraeum, that feeling was forged into an unbreakable bond over a sacred supper. The ritual meal, known as the symposium, was the living heart of the cult, the regular ceremony where initiates became brothers. After the arduous trials of initiation, this was their reward and their reinforcement. The setting itself was designed for intimacy. The initiates would recline on the long, raised stone benches that lined the side walls of the underground temple, their bodies angled toward the central aisle. Above them, the vaulted ceiling was often painted with stars, a constant reminder of the cosmic drama they served. At the far end, the Tauroctony relief watched over them. The bulls eternal sacrificed the source of the meal's power. The ceremony was led by the higher-ranking members, the paters or fathers. Their authority was not based on birth or wealth, but on spiritual progress through the 7 grades. A pater would preside from a place of honor, guiding the ritual with solemn precision. The meal began with prayers and chants, likely in a Persian-sounding liturgical language that added to the sense of ancient esoteric power. The sound would have echoed softly off the stone, a low hum that vibrated in the chest. Then came the elements, bread and wine, but this was no ordinary supper. The bread was often marked with a knife before being broken, a clear symbol of the weapon that slew the cosmic bull. The wine represented the bull's life-giving blood spilled to fertilize the world. As the paters distributed the pieces of marked bread and passed the communal cup, each man partook in a direct physical communion with the myth. They were not merely remembering a story, they were ingesting its essence. In eating the marked bread, they absorbed the strength and salvation of Mithras' act. In drinking the wine, they shared in the vital force that the bull's death released into the cosmos. This transformed the simple meal into a potent magic. It bound each man to the god and, more importantly, to every other man in that room. In the civilian world outside, they might be a Roman soldier, a Greek merchant, and a Syrian bureaucrat divided by class and custom. But here, on these stone benches, they were equals brothers who had stared into the same darkness during their initiations and now shared the same sacred food. The symposium reenacted a mythical event, the feast of thanksgiving that Mithras shared with the sun god, Sol Invictus, after their cosmic victory. By replicating it, the initiates were not just commemorating that feast, they were participating in it, joining the table of the gods themselves. The conversation during the meal was likely a mixture of solemn reflection and genuine camaraderie, a chance to discuss teachings, reinforce beliefs, and strengthen the practical network of trust that such a secret society provided. In a vast, impersonal empire, this ritual meal offered something precious: a chosen family, a purpose, and a direct line to the machinery of the universe, all shared over a piece of marked bread and a cup of wine. 25 ceremonies, each a key to a lost world. From the monthly Mesopotamian meal for the dead to the Roman legionaries' secret rebirth in a shower of bull's blood, we have crossed continents and millennia, tracing the intricate patterns humanity once wove to speak with the unseen. The diversity is staggering: a king humiliated in Babylon, a priest bleeding in Oaxaca, a community walking a desert hummingbird, an emperor crowned by a mountain. Yet beneath this breathtaking variety pulses a set of shared primal human impulses. Every one of these rituals, in its own way, was a desperate, beautiful attempt to answer the same eternal questions. How do we face the terrifying mystery of death? How do we ensure the fertility of our land and our people? How do we legitimize power and maintain social order? And most profoundly, how do we connect with something greater than ourselves, to plead for mercy, to seek understanding, or to simply feel less alone in a vast, uncertain cosmos? These forgotten ceremonies show us that ancient people did not see the world as a random collection of events. They saw it as a story, a conversation, a delicate contract. The ritualist was the translator, the technician, the designated speaker for that conversation. Whether through the precise crack of a bone, the solemn wave of a paper wand, or the agonizing climb to a mountain altar, they worked to maintain the balance. They offered what was most precious: grain, incense, gold, blood, even life itself, in the hope of receiving stability, rain, victory, or a promise beyond the grave in return. It was a logic of sacred reciprocity, a belief that the universe operated on a system of exchange that could be navigated with the right words, the right actions, and the right intermediaries. The fires are long cold, the chants have faded into silence. The last practitioner who knew the exact pressure to apply to a sheep's liver, or the precise sequence of steps to trace the Nazca spider, has been dust for centuries. Yet the echoes remain. They resonate in our modern yearning for community and purpose, in our rituals of remembrance, in our collective hopes for renewal with each passing year. The forms have changed beyond recognition, but the human heart that devised them has not. We still seek patterns in chaos, offer sacrifices for future gain, and long for a connection that transcends our individual lives. So we leave these 25 doorways slightly ajar, glimpses into the shadowy chambers where our ancestors met their gods. Which of these forgotten ceremonies left the deepest mark on you? Was it the intimate fear of the Kispum, the terrifying spectacle of the Wicker Man, or the secret comfort promised at Eleusis? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation. If you want to join this quest for more hidden histories and unraveled mysteries, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell. Our journey through the echoes of the past is